The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lines. How's it going?
Going pretty good. I thought all week about how to open this episode. And for a while, I was kind of rattling this joke around in my head that I couldn't quite nail the phrasing for, which was like how I was like worried that I didn't play the right game because the name of this game is all like punctuation and Roman numerals. And I was afraid I confused it with something else. But I couldn't really nail the phrasing down. And when I was grabbing the Wikipedia link for this game, I noticed that the genre is listed as racing/vehicular combat. And I decided I'd just rather talk about that because that means that this game is in the same category as Twisted Metal, which we played for another episode. And I think that's amazing.
Wouldn't that also put it in the same as like Mario Kart?
Yeah, which I also would not have described as vehicular combat until now.
Well, I mean, not to be too graphic, but I think it's because most of the time when you hear the word vehicular, it's followed by manslaughter.
Yes. Yes, it sounds very violent because of that association.
Exactly. So vehicular, you're like, I mean, surely they're not going to say manslaughter. And it's like, vehicular combat. And you're like, not as far away as I wanted it to be. Like, it wasn't like vehicular fun times. It's like vehicular combat. Yeah. So we played R.C.Pro-Am-II. RC Pro-Am 2. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. Came out. Did you look at when this game came out?
92 by Rare.
Does all of that just not melt your brain? The same people who developed this developed Banjo-Kazooie. The same people who developed this developed Donkey Kong 64 and Donkey Kong Country. The same year that this came out, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was a year and a half old. Like, how does this Nintendo game exist? Like, it was late to the party. It's made by a company that definitely should have been doing other stuff. It's published by Trade West, which I associate with a totally different genre of games. Like, this is just a weird little artifact of history.
It is, and I kind of feel that it has the feel of it was somebody on Rare's team, like it was just their passion project, and they got it like 50% of the way there. They got kind of the mechanics built out, the physics behind the different upgrades, and somebody was like, yeah, we can throw another 100 hours at this and just finish it off because it's for an outmoded platform now, and like, yeah, sure, we've already got some time and money sunk into it. Let's just finish it off and ship it.
The last game for the original Nintendo was made was released in 1995. 95. The N64 was getting ready to come out. What a shelf life, dude. Like, that's a 15-year console span. Like, that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, again, back in the day, for a Nintendo game, you could have a single developer, cradle to grave, develop a game, So it's kind of like saying, did you know that there are indie titles that could run on a, 16-bit thing today? And it's like, yeah, because it doesn't take that much time and energy to throw into it, So it would surprise me way more if the shelf life of like between the PS4 came out and the last PS3 game was like 10 years, to be like, we made this incredibly, $100 million AAA title that we threw at the PS3 that no one was playing anymore.
Yeah. And that they can't play on the new console because we still haven't solved backwards compatibility 30 years later. What is your nostalgia goggles for this game, or your nostalgia experience? You may have nostalgia goggles because you recommended this game, and it was not until I had poked at it a little bit that I was like, oh, okay, I remember this. So what I think I sense that you have the deeper experience.
Oh yeah, no, this is so. Let me tell you a tale. So for me, this, like, as you found out, I did not play a lot of RPGs when I was a kid, right? The very first RPG I ever played was when I was 14, and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know, I started off with the Cadillac of RPGs, and then from there is I was like, oh my god, they make video games? Like, I don't have to coordinate with 5 other friends. I can get this heroin just from Joe Shabat's off the street. Oh my god. And that's why I struggled the first few years of college. So
because of my crippling heroin addiction.
Yeah. And also I'd gotten into RPGs. So that being said, the addiction, the addictive property was still part of my personality. This was what clutched my RPG addiction, right? So I loved this game, and unfortunately I didn't own it. A friend of mine owned it, but every time I went over to their house, we played this game because I loved it, because it had that kind of leveling mechanic to it. And I was like, oh my God, it's a racing game, but as I race, I can get faster and better, and I get to choose how I invest this money and all this sort of stuff. Oh my God, it was right up my alley. So yes, played this quite a bit on the couch with a friend. I think it was the main reason why I was friends with them.
That's fair. I mean, we've all had those friends.
Yep.
I think it's worth pointing out that as late as this game came out, right, 92 is just bizarrely late into the Nintendo Entertainment System's lifespan to still be releasing like a high quality, like well-made, product for the time, right? It's not like a movie tie-in game like The Lion King where you're like, oh, well, yeah, it's like a movie tie-in game, right? This is like an independent shovelware. Yeah, this is an independently developed thing that the company thought they were obviously going to be able to sell. The original RC Pro-Am Not 2 came out in 1988, right? So a pretty long development cycle. I mean, I'm sure they were probably doing other things, but like a pretty long development cycle between those two. And a lot of the mechanics that are in the second one are present in the first one, right? Because part of me was tempted to be like, oh God, this came out so late in history that I now have to rack my brain on what racing games this may have been inspired from, not the other way around, because now there are Super Nintendo games that this game could have been ripping off, which is just weird, right? It's like traveling with the doctor. You're just like, wait, so we're dealing with things that haven't happened yet to prevent a thing that's already happened from happening again in a parallel universe?
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Yeah, exactly right. So knowing that the first game came out in 88 and that it shares a lot of mechanics and other kind of visual and auditory similarities, like that kind of helped recalibrate my like, oh no, this is sort of a precursor to a lot of other, your Mario Karts and your Twisted Metals, right? Not this insane universe where time works backwards and somehow a Super Nintendo game inspired a Nintendo game.
Well, and so this is tangential, but I promise it comes back. A while back, I was talking to Megan, and I was explaining to her how, scientists did an experiment to determine that light is not, that light speed doesn't change regardless of speed, right? So they set up basically, an atomic clock, up at a very, very high altitude and another one at a very, very low altitude. And then basically over 80 years, saw that the time did in fact dilate, right? A very, very, very small amount, but that the clock that was moving faster up above, that less time had passed than the one that was moving at sea level. And I was like, isn't that cool? And she stared at me eyes wide and she said, they wasted their lives. And I said, well, they did other stuff. And she's like, no, terrible life spent. And she just left the room and just did other stuff.
I love that her idea of all science is observational science. Like, so someone set up this clock and then was like anointed by the Pope to be the watcher, like the knight in Last Crusade who has to literally sit in front of the Holy Grail.
Yeah. And so I said the reason why I think that comes back is it's like the first one was released in 1988 and the second one was released in 1992. It's like, well, I mean, the team did other stuff.
They were allowed to go home.
Yeah, like they and that's why I kind of think that probably what happened was they had the first one and there was just some guy that just kept tinkering around with it and then got it most of the way there. And they're like, yeah, put a bow on it, ship it, we're good.
This could also be a Sony Spider-Man situation where for some insane reason they were like, oh crap, we're going to lose the rights to this copyright or to the trademark or whatever. Unless we produce another game, it's going to revert to, the publisher or to some other company, to Nintendo, who knows. So maybe they were just like, crap, make another one that's basically the same thing except better in some ways and get it out there.
Exactly. And that was before they decided that Nicolas Cage would make a great Spider-Man,
That the fact that sentence is true is just utterly bizarre. My nostalgia experience for this game is really simple. I don't remember what it is. Like, I know that I've played this game, but I can't nail down where or with whom. I'm positive that I did not own this game. And I'm also really confident that I would not have rented this game because by the time I was consistently allowed to be the sibling who picked what game was rented, I was deep into the Super Nintendo Genesis era. So I would not have been renting regular Nintendo games. So I can probably guess this was probably like one of my brother's friends that may have had this. And I was either with him at their house, like at a neighbor's house or something. But I know for certain that I've played this game. Like it all came flooding back, but I can't, all of the context is fuzzy. So, I don't know if that frees me from nostalgia goggles or means they're there and I just can't see them like a perfect illusion, but that it is what it is.
Yeah, we'll find out. So you know what? It's actually generally when we do these episodes, I kind of try to keep loose track of time, so we can be respectful of everyone's time. But my little cuckoo clock just went off, which means it's shill o'clock.
Oh, this is good now because mine just went off after you were done saying that, which means mine is traveling considerably faster than yours because it just now caught up.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody's going to fact check that.
No one's doing the math, man.
It is shill o'clock, though. So at this point, we like to thank followers, listeners, subscribers, people who come and hang out on Twitch. This game actually got weirdly like interested audience because I was kind of doing like a chatting thing over it while I was playing casually and had a nice little Twitch session. So all of those people, the listeners, the reviewers, all that stuff is absolutely precious to us. I do want to call out, this actually literally just happened yesterday. And I shared this review with you. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but somebody took the time to send us a very, very sweet review. They recommended a book that I immediately went to the library and downloaded because it seems super interesting about the Nintendo Genesis War, or Nintendo Sega, I guess. And also, this person consistently plays games we have done episodes on that they haven't played so that they'll have a better understanding of our critique, which is just, I can't think of a better word than sweet. Like that is the most heartwarming, sweet thing for someone to say, like, I'm so interested in your review that I go do my homework so that your critique will make more sense to me. Like that's a massive amount of pressure for what we are absolutely phoning in every other week.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, like the amount of phoning it in is impressive, but no, I mean, honestly, I think that the heart behind what we do is there. Like we both give it our all every time. We just do way less prep work than we should. We're the people who show up to the football game having never worked out, having not, just popped up off the couch and said, I'm going to go play football. And Somehow we roll those 20s and sometimes we get a touchdown, but the moral of the story is we're gassed, winded, and swinging for the fences the whole time. But as long as the audience doesn't see that, then it's great.
I think you're giving me an idea for an incredible bonus episode we should do. We should critique a game based just on the box and the book and not actually play the game. Because that would be the logical extreme of not doing research, is like, oh, this time we literally didn't even play the game.
Oh, man. No, actually. So agreed. Actually, I don't know if this is how it works, but what we should do is a live stream, right? where somebody gives us a title, right? We have 1 minute to just do as much research on it as we can, and then come up with a coherent 10-minute quick review.
Ooh.
And then you just do that or 20 minutes, like a 20-minute review. And we do that 3 times iteratively. It would be that's the equivalent of going to a improv bar.
Yeah. I need a genre box art that was poorly translated from Japanese by someone who only spoke Russian.
Yeah, and the real key would be if somebody said, Mega Man 6. It's like, no, I played that one. We can't do that one. I actually played it. No, move along. JoJo's Weird Adventure for the NES. Nope, never played that one. Let's do it.
Let's do that one. But yeah, all of those people, the reviews, the listeners, the watchers, the subscribers, we do love you all. Patreon is one of the only ways we ask people if they want to contribute financially, they can. All of our Patreon patronites, all of our patronites, all of our centurions, they're all valuable, beautiful. They help us, pay the bills to keep the show on the internet. But we do want to take a special moment to call out one of our 8-bit classics, Michael S., and our 16-bit hero, Jacob K. If you want to be one of those people, links are in the show notes. We joke all the time, particularly me, because I'm the one who puts the show notes together, that there's nothing in there. There's ways you can support us linked in the show notes, and those are always there. So if there's one and only thing you actually check the show notes for, it's ways to leave us a review. If you really want to, you can reach out to us. And if you really, really want to, you can give us money.
And with that, on with the show. Visuals.
They're fine.
That was so antithetical to my lead-in.
Yeah, it was. And I think it's actually appropriate because I was thinking a lot about the visuals for this, and I was like, why do I feel this cognitive dissonance? Because I would put the controller down and just literally kind of look at the screen. And then a couple times I looked up screenshots and I was looking at the manual, and I was just like, why, when I am thinking about the visuals, do I sort of feel hostile toward them? And when I'm not thinking about it and I'm just playing the game, they seem perfectly fine. And I realized the game is designed with movement in mind. And what I think I mean by that is, this is a Nintendo game, right? Even though it came out in 1992, it's still a original Nintendo game. And I don't think it's using any of the super secret sauce like Super Mario Brothers 3 had extra chips crammed into the cartridge. I don't think this game's doing anything like that, but it's very smooth and fluid. You get a little bit of screen flicker and a tiny bit of screen tearing, but generally everything moves super fast and super seamless. But if you look at it stationary, everything looks like it was drawn in MS Paint. But you're not supposed to see anything stationary. It's supposed to be flying by at 1,000 miles an hour. And when it is, then you're very thankful that it's really clear where the track is, and it's really clear where the drops are, and it's really clear what's water and what's oil, right? You have these super simple, basically tokens of reward and hazard that you can identify instantly, right? There's no parsing of complicated, is that deep water or is it shallow water? No, it's water. All water behaves exactly the same. Some of the levels have rivers in them, and that water looks very different, but it's blue water, so it behaves exactly like the puddles of water, right? I really think this game is meant to be played and otherwise not really looked at, because they optimized for visuals powering the gameplay so that you don't ever feel like everything is blurry and confusing and you're being fed too much information. So in that sense, I actually think the super simple kind of childlike visuals were 100% the right way to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the game does move very quickly. And actually this kind of leads into one of the things that I have here, which is that the amount of the course that you can see and how quickly the course moves supports practice gameplay, right? It is almost impossible for you to see a thing and then react to it, unless like if you're heading dead towards a puddle, you're not going to get out of the way of that puddle before you hit it. Now if you're on like the fringe of it, you can reasonably kind of duck and dodge and get out of the way, so it's not completely hopeless. But that being said, is that if you don't know where the go fast arrows are, you're gonna miss them. That being said, and that's also true with the amount of course they let you see. So the size of the car and the size of the course is such that, again, by the time something enters the screen, you have maybe a tenth of a second to assess what it is and what you can and are going to try to do about it. And that's it. So if it had wildly complex visuals that were kind of difficult to discern and parse, that would be incredibly cumbersome. You do have to internalize where a lot of the stuff is. And we can get to that a little bit more in mechanics. I will say that I thought that they did a good job with the visuals in terms of the hitbox, because the hitbox for things that help you is super generous, and the hitbox there for things that hurt you is really tight. So, I mean, you could, as long as you are, I honestly think that there are three, like there are arrows on the course, right? But that there's three zones, there's top, middle, and bottom. And as long as you're in that zone anywhere, it's going to capture that you touch that accelerometer, right? Whereas with the oil, you got to really hit that oil. Like you kind of have to hit it pretty dead on before it says, nah, man, you spun out. So the visuals, as far as the hitbox, I thought were done very well.
Yeah, and as we have often said in the past, like they're generous in favor of the player, and they're kind of tightwads about it when it's going to punish the player, which is pretty much always the way you want to make that decision. You pretty much always want to say, okay, in this case, this will be helpful and it will make playing the game more fun. So let's have that hitbox be super wide, because then you get the zoomy arrows and you feel cool. This will be destructive and will completely ruin their time and make them lose the race. So that one, we're going to make them basically crash directly into that before they get nailed. And it's because, I mean, you're playing this on like the, 106 pixels that made up a Nintendo resolution, right? Like 106 by 106. I know it's not really, don't at me about that. And it's 4:3. Like, and this cannot be overstated. It's isometric. So picture Final Fantasy Tactics in your mind. Now imagine cars and trying to drive one at that camera angle. And that's what driving in this is like. So isometric racing is an absolutely terrible design choice that history has just all over, like just absolutely crapped all over that design choice. But because they made other design choices that are more favorable to the player, where it's fun and less harmful when it would harsh your fun, they can kind of go with this really terrible artistic choice to have an isometric camera, right? An isometric view of the field.
Right. Because again, like they said, look, nobody's playing this for the absolute pixel perfect precision. Honestly, I think that if I were to play this, I would be with a friend. I would not be playing it to race against my friend, but to race against the computer. I actually thought about it a couple of times, and we can get this more into mechanics, but I was like, if you did it right, and you played with a friend where like they were the second player, then you could kind of, say like, okay, you take third this time and I'll take fourth and I'll do this other thing. So, like you could basically get, 6 lives instead of 3,
yeah. I mean, real racing is done like this. Like in cycle racing, they race as a team, but the team is intending for one person to be the winner.
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's I when I learned that about, like, when all that controversy with Lance Armstrong was like a thing in the news, and people were talking about the sport of bike racing. It's like, oh well, he raced for, I think, the U.S. Postal Service team, that was the sponsor, and it's like, oh, so these people literally form a human shield in front of him so that he is getting less wind resistance, so he gets less tired pedaling, and then when it's time for him to break away, he breaks away still fresh because he's been basically cycling in like a little vacuum, right? And then he's able to break away and win. And like, that's an understood part of how cycling is done. And because the computer benefits from rubber band physics in this, and you don't, which we will definitely have to talk about in mechanics, having your friend use one of their missiles to blow up a car so that you don't take fourth and have to waste to continue, totally legit strategy.
Yeah, it's a legitimate strategy. And actually, because this isn't really, I know it's too much in mechanics. I'll get to it in mechanics. But the one of the things I will say about the visuals that I did like was, I didn't count it because I can't count. Is that there
Thank
were
you for sharing that vulnerability with the audience.
Yeah, no sweat. Thank God my livelihood doesn't depend on it, right? So there are a lot of different frames of animation for the car. So there's like, what I'm saying is that there's the cars dead at you, and I think that there's the cars that instead of just dead at you 45 degrees, 90 degrees, there's like dead at you, what would it be, 27.5 degrees, right? No, that's not right. Anyways, 22.5 degrees, right? 45 degrees, so on and so forth. But there's an extra, like, there's a northeast, between each one, which I felt that, again, given the isometric viewpoint, was made all of the difference, right? Because it's an additional 8 animations, but it makes it seem so much more fluid than, if it's like, you're heading straight towards the camera. Now you're heading at a 45 degree angle. Now you are heading 90 degrees perpendicular. It's like just having that additional little fluidity of when you're turning, which is basically all the time, that had to look fluid. Otherwise, it would have looked just janky as hell.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if you might be right that it's 8 directions instead of just it's definitely not 6. But anyway,
I think what I'm arguing is that
it'd be 12.
Normally there would be 4 if it was on all 90s, 8 if it had the 45s. I'm saying that there's probably 16.
Oh.
So one in between each.
Yeah,
each 45,
The nice thing is even if it's 1,000, it doesn't change the point that I'm getting at, which is this reaffirms this game is meant to be seen moving, because the vehicles, right? Because you start out as monster trucks, and then you become Formula One racers, and then something else.
I never got to the something else. I got to be a Formula One racer once, and it was the best.
Yeah, no, same. They mention it in the manual that there's like two or three upgrades. But anyway, the car, if you actually look at the vehicle is not animated. What you're looking at are static pictures at the correct orientation. You can't see the tires spinning. You don't see little puffs of smoke coming out of the tailpipe. Like
unless you're hitting that nitrous, that sweet, sweet nitrous.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But, and again, that's like it's temporary, right? They didn't have to animate that from every possible, vantage point. So they're able to create this like almost 3D effect where if you drive donuts, which I did a couple times because I was like, oh, I exploded, I'm definitely going to die. If you just drive donuts, and so you're essentially making the car rotate, it looks crazy smooth. And it's because they were able to put all their effort into the angles that you were going to be viewing the vehicle at, not then also animating, right? Because normally it's like, okay, this character, if you see them walking to the left, they have 3 frames of animation in their little walk motion. It's like, oh, sometimes they're coming at you, and it's like, okay, that's 3 more frames. Sometimes they're walking away from you. Oh crap, okay, that's 3 more frames, right? So each one additional direction you can see them from, just that one walk animation now that's 3 additional frames you got to animate. This is not that. These are static pictures. So they had to draw it at all of those angles, but they did not have to animate it, which made it a much more approachable amount of work. And there's less crap on screen, which means it can stay at that maximum frame rate all the time, which for a racing game, you kind of want.
Oh, yeah. No, if all of a sudden the frame rate was all over the place, that would be a mess. One of the other things I think is hyper important is the big giant yellow arrows on the course for turns. Super awesome. Again, because everything's flying at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You can't really predict what's going to happen. So the fact that, and yes, there is a little mini map on your HUD, which I guess I looked at occasionally to kind of get a feel for what the course was going to do. That's more like, this year you're this year you're going to make, $10 million on your top line, and I need to see a 20% drop to bottom line. That has nothing to do with how you're going to run the business. That's just kind of year-end goal, right? That was what I used the HUD for, that's the gist of what I'm going to try to do here. And then my takeaway was there are a lot of twists and turns on this one, or there are no twists and turns on this one. That was it. That was just a top level, abridgment. But the big giant bold yellow arrows, the game would be unplayable without that. If you were trying to improvise each time, no.
Well, and I think that's actually realistic. Like, I think some real races, because I know there's lots of different racing, but I think some real races actually have marked courses, because if you're down on the road, it can be hard to tell where a turn is going. And if you're going at 180 miles an hour, like in F1 racing, right, you're going super fast and you're not just going in circles like NASCAR. So you kind of need to know where the turns are, right? So I think that may actually not be a video gamey visual. That may just be a racing visual.
Yeah, no, you make left turns all day in NASCAR, and you get to make one right turn once, and typically none after that. So dark. So, anyways, that's not the point. The point is, but yeah, so that very well may be a real racing thing. 100% necessary for this game, and I felt that the distance between when you see the yellow arrow and when you have to react to the yellow arrow was well placed, well timed, especially because the distance from the yellow arrow to the action does not vary it's constant, right? It's based off of the map, which means that as you begin to move faster, as you get better engines, it actually is less helpful, because you're going faster, right? So the amount of time between when you see the arrow and when you have to act is narrowed, which is good, because you're going faster. The game is getting harder, so it kind of plays along that difficulty curve as well.
I mean, by that point, you should have gotten good. Had you not gotten good by then, when you had the more powerful motor?
So let me share with you a story about me getting good at this game. So one of the times, my first big playthrough. So I played through played it for a little bit, but this was my first really solid run. I got to the blue tracks, and I had upgraded my engine like twice, so I think I had the gold engine, and I was like, oh yeah, there we go. No, or silver, something like that. I don't know. A solid engine in this vehicle.
Yeah,
and I had
an engine made of solid metal.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I had some nice beefy tires so they could handle it. Because at one point I did try to I put a monster engine in there and nothing into the tires. And that was it was suboptimal, but delightful. So I had a good engine in the car, and, racing, coming in at this point, like second, third, not claiming too many first, but not losing too badly either. And then all of a sudden, one of them became a Formula One racer, and I was like, well, that can't be good. I don't know what that means or how that's going to impact. Wow, and so the Formula One racer just left me and the other three of us just in the dust. And I was like, oh my God. And I didn't know that you had to collect the pro-am to get the Formula One racer. I didn't know what it was. I thought he just put a particularly powerful engine in his car and then that transformed the vehicle or something. But I was like, okay. So I am now playing for second place. We are all playing for second place, right? So I was like, that's fine. I can deal with that, And so then the next race, 2 out of the 3 had the RC Pro-Am racer. I was like, oh man, but that's fine. It's fine, man, because I just can't come in fourth. As long as I'm coming in third, we're fine. So I pull ahead of the green car who was in third, and he shot me to death. because he put all of his money into guns. And so I was like, oh, well, then that's game, Hendrix, because I'm only seeing tailpipe dust from 2 of the cars, and the other guy's got his gat out and he is shooting out the window at me. So that's my story. So yeah, I definitely felt that.
No, and I think the RC Pro-Am 2 or whatever, the letters you have to collect to make the car upgrade, like, we'll be able to pick this apart more in mechanics if we want to, but when it comes to the visual of that, in the game, like in the race, your experience is a great safety net, right? Because you start playing and you're like, trucks. Okay, this is a truck racing game. Got it.
Yeah.
And then, you play.
It's weird that they have a Formula One racer on the cover, but Well,
so I will get there, sir. So you play, you die, you play, you die, you get better. And then eventually someone, maybe you, but someone becomes the race car. And now you're like, what is, what's going on over there? Right. And then you go on to have your lived experience. But here's the thing that I'm noticing. When you turn the game on, it says RC Pro-Am 2, and there's a picture of the red car, which if you're playing single player, you are always the red car, right? So it's the red car as the Formula One racer, which when you press start and start playing the game is not what you see. You see the truck, and everybody has a truck. On the cover of the game, there are only, like the literal box, there are only the trucks firing missiles and explosions and crap. So that means if you had the experience of looking at the box, putting the cartridge in, turning the game on, and then getting to a race, you would see truck, race car, truck. And that's a really like subliminal little abilities. Like they use the difference between the title screen and the box or the book art to kind of be like, hey, there's more than one type of car in here. Go look for that. It might matter later.
Yeah. And that's the thing, so once I did that, I was like, wow. And then I did kind of do some legwork, and I was like, oh, you gotta create the RC Pro-Am 2. Got it. All right. That makes sense. And again, that then mechanically very dramatically changes the game, especially because getting the Formula One racer is the going Super Saiyan of this game. Like being a truck immediately becomes completely obsolete,
Yeah, even if you've upgraded your tires and your engine, the Formula One racer, the base Super Saiyan is still more powerful than the strongest human.
Yeah, no, I mean, you could be the best TN you could be, but you're not going to touch that Formula One racer, man. It doesn't matter. Can go get got.
The one other thing I want to say about the visuals, because I want to talk about the plane and the bombs that it drops, but I care a lot more about that, how it impacts the game mechanically. So I will try to portal back to that topic. But the one other thing that I really cared about with the visuals is there isn't enough variety. This game has, I think, 24 tracks, but only like 4 different themes. Right? There's like the green, like standard racetrack theme you start with, and then there's like the blue city and like a deserty, dusty kind of beige one. Right? Like there's just not enough. Like I get like every piece of art has to be drawn by hand using ancient technology back from way in the early 90s, but I wish there'd just been more variety. Like it's just, just give me a little something more. Even if it's just colors, even if they just went the lazy route and they were like, here, this still looks like a regular racetrack with tires stacked along it and trees and stuff, but like this one's blue because it's snowy. This one's orange because it's autumny, right? Just something.
The one minor note I have for visuals that I just want to throw in there, which is that they do have power-ups that are race car specific, and those are your color. The ones that are Omni Racer are, flashing, like it's flashing through the spectrum. And I was like, man, it could have just been white. It didn't need to be ultimate rainbow colored. It's not bad. it's not. It's and it is very flashy, which catches your eye. But again, there's nothing on the racetrack except it would be the only like blanket white thing on the racetrack. So I was just kind of like,
Yeah, I mean, back when video games could only put out like 256 colors. I totally associate that rainbow cycle thing with like, you want this. So I don't know if that is normal design language in early video games, especially I'm thinking in my mind in like early arcade games, but to me that's like shiny. I want it, right? Like solid colors may be good, may be bad, but rainbow shiny, yeah, I want that. I want rainbow shiny.
As a wise man once said to me, green is my favorite color next to shiny.
What's he up to? Anyway, you got anything else for visuals?
No, I'm good. Audio?
Yeah, there isn't much. There's not a lot.
No, there's not. So first of all, I do like the intro music, the do 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 do. It's fun, it's peppy, and then no more music. They said music here, nowhere else. But I know
the shopping screen has music.
It's true. But I think I know why that there's no music. It's because you know what there is instead of music? The perpetual hum of engines, right? And if there's one thing that somebody on this show won't shut the fuck up about, it's that the Nintendo can't register, multiple tones like that all at once, right? So if they're going to have the hum of engines all the time, it would be like playing Mario, listening to the Mario music, but it's but every step is you hitting a turtle shell. So I think that that's why they didn't put music in the thing, because they wanted the constant hum of the engines. I don't know if that's the right choice, because I don't really care about I understand that the engines are going,
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm surprised you would call yourself out like that as constantly complaining about this.
Hey man, the way to growth is just self-reflection, So
introspection is the path forward.
George needs to do that.
We nostalgia goggles.
/we/ nostalgia goggles.
Nice. I think you're right that there are going to be other sounds that would make it impossible for them to have a melody of any repute constantly playing. I don't think they optimized for engine sounds. I would say they optimized for race noises, because there's also the like up when you hit the like super speed, chevrons. I'm really glad I remembered that word, because I was just about to say arrows, but they're not arrows, they're chevrons. You hit the super speed chevrons in it makes like a and each vehicle and each time. So if there's 3 or 4 of them in a row, which happens very regularly, and each vehicle hits it's right. So that would they would have to dedicate all audio channels to that. Later there's a lot of tire screeching, because you get into windier courses. Later, there's a lot of explosions for various reasons, right? So if they had composed music for this, they would just be constantly crapping all over it by the time you're not even that far into the game, right? In the early races, they're not that windy, so it's not a ton of tire screeching, and they're not none of the trucks have weapons yet, so there's not a lot of explosions and nonsense. So at first, it is the engine noise overriding what would be the music if there was music there. But I think you're right that they just said like, we can't do all of the wacky sound effects we're going to want to do later after, like race number 6, and also have tune skis playing on the radio. So we're going to optimize for explosions.
Yep. My name's Mr. Torque, and I've got one question and one question only. Explosions? That being said, I have one more note for audio, but it actually kind of ties into mechanics pretty well. So I want to hold off on that. But agreed is that there are a tremendous number of sound effects that are informative to gameplay, right? So, and again, I think that's hypercritical when there is consistently a lot of stuff going on off screen, So you need to know whether or not that people are hitting those speed chevrons, or somebody other than you is hitting the puddle. And I mean, like, you need those audio affordances. And so a lot of times, like, especially with a lot of the games we've been playing recently, for whatever reason, there haven't been a whole lot of audio affordances, like things specifically that are feeding you information. And that's all this is. It's all audio affordances. There's nothing else going on in here. And I do think that was the right call to make. But what other notes do you have? Because I've got, like I said, one more that'll tie us into mechanics.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention, just because I thought it was odd, and I'll co-sign that sentiment. A lot of the games we've just coincidentally played recently, the audio was good or bad, but it didn't matter as much because, like, oh, there's zany, fast-paced stuff happening all the time, and I need these audio cues, right? So they definitely made the right decision prioritizing the sounds of the world over, smooth sounds of the 80s, 98.1 on the truck's radio. I guess be smooth sounds of the 90s. But the chevrons, when you hit them and other trucks are hitting them, I don't know if they did this on purpose or if they overloaded like what noises the Nintendo could put out, but it does like this kind of cascading, like, when you go over one. And if you are on one of those long stretches where you're hitting a bunch of them and the other trucks are hitting a bunch of them, some of them like misfire where it'll be like flat or sharp, and it's not the same sound being played over and over again, which we don't have to spend too much time on this, but like that just got my technologist brain going like, oh, is this not a pre-recorded sound? Is this actually being generated on hardware every time, where like there's instructions for what sounds to make, but it's using the hardware like an instrument and not just playing a pre-recorded sound effect? Because the hardware can absolutely do that, right? That's like, if you've ever played like an electric keyboard, right? It's making the noise like in MIDI. And I just was sitting there staring at my screen like, why do I care so much about this? Like, it's just a glitch in an old stupid game. But like, I just couldn't stop thinking like, why would they do this one sound effect programmatically instead of just recording it?
Well, I believe that my understanding is the reason why they did it programmatically is because the tachyon field in that particular system was set up such that this type of game would create a subspace interference if it was pre-recorded. So in order to bypass that, they had to generate in situ using the excess bosons.
What's the dish? They always used a dish to solve problems. Dish. Yeah, the deflector array. Yeah,
the deflector array.
Yeah,
right.
Man, that
deflector array. It's charged with antiprotons. It'll explode half the ship if we hit it.
Man, that dish did everything. Like it
did. Well, do you know what's
the most important part of the ship after like the engines?
Well, it's pretty cool. Do you know what its purpose is?
I mean, it's not like the ram scoop in Ender's Game, is it?
I forget what the ram scoop did in Ender's Game.
The ships are traveling so fast and they do not travel through subspace that you need something that collects microscopic dust particles. Otherwise, they would blast through the front of the ship like bullets.
That is exactly what it's for.
Yay!
It doesn't like collect them like the ram scoop did. It literally deflects them. It is the deflector dish. But yeah.
Does what it says on the tin.
That's what it says on the tin. And that's the cool thing about like true science fiction is they had to make up like a small subset of things so that way the show could exist at all. Like, we need subspace. Why? Because otherwise, the minute that an Enterprise leaves, it was never seen or heard from again and was not part of society anymore. So we need them to be able to communicate faster than light. Subspace. Okay, that's fine. So anyways, my last note for audio is, as we mentioned, most of the audio is to inform decisions, is to relay information. One of the things that it will relay is when somebody comes in first, it makes a little sound, when somebody finishes the race, right? So typically, because this game has, some strong rubber band physics, when one racer finishes the race, the other ones are not too far behind, right? But normally when I heard that, it was my cue to quickly check the map. And if I was just hopelessly behind, I then did the thing that would cause me to want to trade off with another player, which is I then hard stop, turned around, and collected everything I could on the course because I was already lost, right? I was going to lose a life anyways. So I just went and collected all of the dollars, all of the stars, all of the money, all of the pro-ams, everything I could get my grubby little hands on, and then double backed and finished the race because there was no reason not to. And a lot of the times, the way they have it structured, the bonuses are way more monetarily valuable than coming in first. So if I was going to lose a life, I was going to go out on a sea of riches, which served me pretty well.
Okay, so I got to tell you, and this is going to be our segue into controls and mechanics, as you implied it would be. So I had a note in here that I thought was like kind of a minor, like a throwaway note, like, you can actually collect more money than you win in prizes sometimes, or like a comparable amount. Wow, that really means you should be looking for that stuff while you're racing. It did not occur to me to take my ball and go home. And I'm going to go play another round of this game just to see this with my own two thumbs. Like this is, you have blown my mind that the game will not only accommodate that, but basically incentivize it.
Yeah. No, like if you're going to lose a life, you might as well make that life as valuable as humanly possible. Double back and just collect everything you can.
And because you can buy extra lives. So like if you have like a fully upgraded vehicle and you're really still struggling, or you made a dumb mistake or something, like you are totally incentivized to be like, you know what? Fine. You guys just have your little race. I'm just going to go collect all the money you left on the race course.
Yep. And that's the thing too, is that so, and I honestly don't know really how I feel about this. I didn't pour enough hours into the game to really become a true expert on it and like really weigh in on this. But yes, absolutely. I had the same note, which is that the amount of money that you pick up can far eclipse your prize winnings, like, because on the first courses, especially, you get like $1,000 for coming in first, $750 for coming in second, I think $500 for coming in third, and $250 for coming in fourth, right? And if you come in fourth, you've lost a life, right? So let's discount that for a second, right? So that means literally the difference between the theoretically best case scenario and the worst case scenario that does not actually have a permanent impact is $500, right? So with that in mind, it's like you can easily pick up $1,500 on some of those first courses, which again, so it's like I came in first one time, but I was just focused, like doggedly coming in first. And I came in first by a fair margin, right? And I got $1,000 and I happened to pick up like $200, right? But the guy who came in third picked up like, or the person who came in second, got $750, but picked up $1,200 in prize money. So I was like, oh my God, this person just wiped the floor with me ultimately, because yes, you do get points for coming in first, but it's you're playing the long game here, right? Because if you've got no money, then eventually you're going to have no points, right? And I remember the one place where where I actually made a conscious decision here was I had RC Pro-Am 1, right? Because you have to collect the 1 twice to make 2, right? And so I was playing a course and literally I was actually winning, but I saw that everybody else was missing. No, excuse me. I was missing the M. Everybody else was missing the extra 1 to make it 2, right? So I was the only one missing an M, which means I was the only one that could pick it up. And I blew past it twice on a 2-lap course, And so I literally stopped, turned around, went and got the M, came back and finished fourth. And, Megan said, why did you do that? And I was like, because if I did not get the racing upgrade, I was going to lose that life eventually, right? Probably in the next course. But if I lost that life now, I actually have a fighting chance for the rest of the game. So it absolutely incentivizes you to blatantly lose the game sometimes and go on weird fetch quests in a racing game, which is weird. And again, I don't really know how I feel about it. I'm not deeply upset about it, but it's just it's very antithetical to a racing game.
Well, and I think this is something that I spent a fair amount of time thinking about, particularly once I realized when this game came out, which is this game has way more in common with Mario Kart and Twisted Metal than it does in common with like Excite Bike, right? Excite Bike, which graphically and mechanically is somewhat a contemporary of this game, is very, go faster than everybody else, go the fastest, and you win, right? Whereas this game is more like, okay, there's 24 tracks. You're going to need to kind of plan out what you're going to do to be successful in those later tracks, because you all start out at the same place, but you're not all going to get to the last race at the same place. Some of you are going to have invested in better engines or better tires or more missiles or extra ammo for those missiles or whatever, but you're not all going to be equal members of society when you arrive at track 24, right? So that's, I don't even, like, it's obviously still a racing game, also vehicular combat. Like, it's still in that genre, but
every time you say it, man,
I know it's horrifying. But it's still in those genres. But the fact that there's no timer, right? The fact that once you realize you're not gonna win, that they are like, yeah, go pick up all the drops that were left. Like, totally, we'll wait for you. Take your time.
We'll hang, man.
Yeah, like that doesn't feel like an accident that someone like you cleverly realized, like, oh, you can totally do this. The game won't punish you for it. That really feels like they don't have a timer and they're not rewarding you for the speed with which you finished the race on purpose. Like this is this is their Blue Turtle show. This is the way for the person who's gonna come in last to, make some lemonade out of it.
Agreed. And I think that this, because, this is how the game clutches the fact that it predominantly supports practice gameplay, right? Because, if you do come in dead last, then you've got some catch up. But if you ever want to come in really first, you're going to have to memorize some of these courses, right? You just have to internalize where some of this stuff is. And as I've said before on the show, I'm not a huge fan of practice gameplay when it comes to the show, because I never really feel that we have enough time to play the game for me to truly get good at it. But here's where it starts to get interesting with this particular game, because you get at least 2, if not 3 laps on each course, right? So that actually gives you, if you're paying close attention, enough time to internalize some of each course each time, right? Because of the rubber band physics, it won't let the cars really blow you out of the water, right? So even if you screw up pretty much nonstop on that first lap, and there's a decent distance between you and like the main cluster, you can make that up, So actually, I realized that the number one thing that I needed in order to be successful was to know where all of the chevrons were, right? Because in the beginning, it doesn't really matter as much, but towards the middle of the game, if you don't hit those chevrons, you are not going to win. You will come in fourth, right? So because of how generous the hitboxes were, as I said earlier, right, is that I really do believe that they're just split up into 3. What I did was I memorized it like you would memorize a punch combo in a fighting game, right? So basically, the first time around is I'd say like up, middle, down, middle. And so then right when I hit the first up, I'd be like, okay, I need to stay towards the up portion of the screen because the next one that's going to come is going to be on the up. Okay, now I need to get more towards the center. So that way I can, and I could even do that a little bit with like internalizing where Mudslick was. So I would just basically put in my brain to register, an extra down to say like after this chevron I need to be in a down position because that's what's going on, but basically yes, I would go the first round of the course and then kind of quickly try to memorize where all of the chevrons were, and then the second time hit them all. And then because of the way the rubber bands physics worked, that worked pretty well for me. The downside though is that optimizes for each individual race. It does not optimize for it's great tactically, it's not great strategically, because the game does incentivize you finding RC Pro Ram 2, right? So if I hit all of the chevrons, but I don't collect any of that, I am only going to get so far,
and trying to say like, okay, like up, down, up, center, down, up, center, set, right? Like adding in the collectibles to your, Simon, the infinite digits of pi you're trying to memorize, like that would, because it's like, oh, but you only have to remember, up, center, or bottom. And it's like, yeah, but you have to remember that to 100 digits, right? Like that adds in just doing the chevrons or just doing the chevrons and the obstacles is like pretty reasonable. I think a player could do that like you were doing it, but most people can't memorize as many digits of pi as right? Like that starts to become, you can't do it this way. So it's like, now do you just memorize where the collectibles are and lose a few races so that you can try and come back strong, right? Or do you try and split the difference and say like, oh, okay, well, memorize half chevrons, half collectibles, right? Like then it becomes a weird sort of like, what am I trying to get out of this long term?
Well, and also, too, part of the issue with trying to memorize where all the collectibles are is they can be collected by other players, So you might see that P and you're like, that's where the P needs to be. But when you come back around, if you don't hit all of the chevrons, and somebody may just straight up get to it before you, and then it's not there no more. So that adds an additional layer of complexity. However, I will say that all of this discussion that we're having actually kind of belies one of the things that I appreciate about this game, which is there is a lot of depth to the gameplay considering how simple the mechanics are. It's like, do you maximize for chevrons and do you try to are you really going to make sure that you come in first every time and you get that prize money? You're going to sub-optimize for getting the other monies, but consistently getting that 1,000, that's your way you're going to win your races. And, you're just going to make those moderate improvements. Or are you going to really try to min-max it? And yeah, you may lose a few lives in the beginning, but by the time you're hitting your mid game, you're going to have the best equipment. You're going to have the RC program too, and you're just going to blow everyone out of the water. You're going to be playing it on a razor's edge. It's high risk, high reward, because if you because you can only truly lose a couple of times, So how are you going to play it? What is your how? And again, like for a game of this era, and especially for a game with this simplistic of mechanics, the fact that you can create a strategy and then that informs how you behave tactically is kind of impressive. Again, for a game of this era and how simplistic it actually is mechanically.
Yeah, and I'm thinking through that strategy element and how I think it was actually the right decision to not include any kind of continue save password, right? You start from scratch every single time, with the exception of if you enter your initials as NES, NES, you start with $5,000, which is kind of cool. I like that.
I didn't know that.
I did that cool most of the time. But I think it's because the mechanics are deep enough that they require your attention for the game to be enjoyable. Not having the game's not that long. It's only 24, races. Yeah. So not having a password system or some kind of save system like a battery save means you can't paint yourself into a corner where it is basically impossible for you to be successful. Because imagine if you had a password that was like, okay, I'm at track 19. I'm still in the race or in the truck. Everybody else is in whatever the third upgrade is. I didn't even see it, right? Everybody else is 2 vehicle types beyond me, right? They've reached a level beyond that of a Super Saiyan. And here I am,
what would we even call that? A super duper Saiyan.
So here I am, still wearing my turtle shell and doing Kamehamehas into the water. And like, that's not good. Like that would suck a lot of the joy out of the game, because every time you sat down to play, you'd be like, okay, this time I've got the course completely memorized, and I'm going to nail all the chevrons, and I'm going to avoid all the oil slicks, and I'm going to dodge the stupid bombs out of the goddamn plane, and I'm going to win. But you're racing against the hyper evolved, hyper elite racers who you just can't compete against. And that would probably ruin a lot of people's experiences, because they would say, well, I got this far, I was able to save, I must be able to go on to be successful. And the answer is no. You've actually you've saved yourself into a corner. We normally associate that with like RPGs, but that could totally happen in any game that has strategic upgrade mechanics, even if they're simple like the ones in this game is. So the fact that it's like every time you turn that game on, everybody's equal. We all start at the same place, and then you choose where you go from here, and the CPU will, make decisions within a certain range, I assume, right? And choose where they go from there. I think that was right. I think that was the right way to do it. It allows them to make the mechanics as complex as they are without you breaking that experience for yourself accidentally.
Yes, no, I agree, and that leads us into where you probably have more robust notes than I do, but the cycle time, which is arguably the cycle time is bad, because you definitely you lose them 3 times and you're done. It kicks you back to the beginning every time. In this particular case, though, it didn't really bother me as much, just because I think that this cycle time weirdly informs what you normally kind of hit on, which is that it kicks you all the way back to the beginning because you got more learning to do, son. And there is enough, because a lot of times when it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, you're like, oh my God, I've done this, I've mastered it, I get it, but you almost certainly haven't, because you didn't get all of the power-ups. You probably only got like 10% of them, and this time you can get 20%, 30%. So normally when you clear a stage, it says that you've mastered the stage. But in this case, you can clear the stage and have come nowhere near mastery of the stage, So each time it's kind of like, the way I pictured it was there's, kind of a curve for, this is, if you want to win the game, this is the slope that your curve has to be. But you can keep playing the game with your slope substantially less than that particular slope. You just simply will never win. You will get to a point where you will hard lose and then you come back. But each time you can tweak that slope a little bit higher. So that's why I didn't find the cycle time too abrasive, even though if you had just straight up told me what the cycle time is, I'd be like, no.
Yeah, and I think I had the same experience where I recognize, because it's impossible to play a game for the show or any game now and not be like, I wonder how George feels about cycle time in this. Right? So it's very, if you're, it's kind of like looking at static images of the game, right? If you look directly at the cycle time, you're like, Jesus Christ, it's so bad. Like, you get kicked back to the beginning just because you screwed up 3 times. That's so brutal. But then when you're actually playing the game, you don't feel like it's punishing. You don't feel like you're being screwed. You don't feel like this. You might be annoyed, but over time, it allows you to say, okay, this strategy was successful. This strategy was more successful or less successful than that other successful strategy, right? And you adjust that curve until you ideally eventually would win. And hopefully there's more than one strategy that would lead to success, because not only are there a handful of different, weapons and the engine upgrades and stuff, but, like, you do actually then have to like drive the car, right?
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's really spry, maybe you spec into the shield and you don't ever really do missiles because you're like, hey man, I'm a great driver. Like, I don't care about coming in first. I will come in first as long as I don't get blowed up by missiles. So I spec into the shield. I don't really care about shooting anyone else because nobody's in front of me. I'm in first. Right?
Nice.
Like that would be a legitimate strategy that would still be different from another legitimate strategy of, I'm not that great of a driver, so anytime someone's dumb enough to get in front of me, I explode them, right? So that's like also a possible winning strategy, but still allows for a certain amount of differentiation that would keep the game from getting too samey and too boring.
Well, and I think, though, you kind of hit in the nail on the head, which is that cycle times feel punishing where, if you, for example, if you screw up 3 times, right? So let's take Mario, right? If you screw up and fall into a pit 3 times, right? And it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, no checkpoints, no nothing, right? If it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, that's frustrating. That's a frustrating cycle time, right? But with this game, you have 3 lives. The failure spectrum is almost infinitely gradated, right? Like there's almost an infinite amount of gray there, because the thing is, by the time you've lost a life, you have been deep in the red on that failure spectrum for some time, like you have made many, 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 many mistakes to the point when you finally lose a life. That probably means that you are on a court. First of all, that means that you have been doing poorly enough that you haven't bought so many insane upgrades that they are kludging your player skill your avatar is so powerful that even if you, the player, screw up several times, you still can't lose, right? So you've been playing moderately enough that you don't have the avatar strength to blow everyone out of the water. And on top of that, you would have had to have made several mistakes in that particular course to eventually pay the price of losing 1 life, right? So you can be that hard red on the failure spectrum 3 times at least. Well, twice, and then the third time it kicks you back. But you can get more lives, So I think that's what makes it feel less punishing. Is that it's not that you screw up 3 times and then you're kicked back to the beginning. It's that you screw up a tremendous number of times, but you can only be so hard red in the failure spectrum 3 times before all of a sudden it's like, okay, you had a good run, now try again. And it does feel more like each time it feels like a run. It is closer to the feeling to me of like Enter the Gungeon. Now I know that's a roguelike, which way takes the bite out of being kicked back to the beginning because it's kind of new each time. But it's just each time I played it, I was like, okay, how good's my run going to be? Because I didn't really feel like I was going to beat it. It's just, what's this run? How good did I do?
Well, and I think that comparison is not that far off because this game is for racers and it's always for racers. The question is just how many of those racers is people's, right? So I actually had to look this up. The thing that allows you to have 4 controllers on a Nintendo Entertainment System is called a 4-score, which I think is cute. But that wasn't invented and released until 1990, which means this game, the first game, could not possibly have allowed 4 human players, but this game can have 4 human players. And that actually, to me, would increase the social aspect, which in a game that has an upgrade mechanic sort of pushes it toward that weird roguelike territory, because it's not the game that's different each time, it's the people that are different each time, right? So you're sitting there with your brother and your 2 friends or your neighbors or your cousins or whatever, and you convince one of them that, shield, that's how you win, right? And so now you're encountering an enemy that has way more shield than you had in your last run, right? Because they are trying, you goaded them into it, or you convinced them, or that was their decision because you kept blowing them up with your missiles up their butts, right? So like the more human players you have, you would get a little bit of I'm starting from scratch. We're all starting from scratch. And this set of races is going to be totally different than the set of races we just did a minute ago, right? Whereas against the CPU, I doubt even if they had more sophisticated, memory and programming techniques, most racing games, the racers are fairly consistent, because otherwise it would be maddening to be like, oh God, it's just total randomness every single time. And I have no idea, Donkey Kong always drives the same way, right? Mario always drives the same kind of way. Like human players can drive them differently, but the CPU has like a narrow range. So I mean, this game's obviously not a roguelike, but I would say that you do get into a similar gameplay loop of, it's a little bit different every time, but it's the human element that's making it different.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I like that. I have one other throwaway thing for gameplay. So
throw it away.
Is that no matter how many times you cross the finish line, so when you cross it, it says 1 lap left. No matter how many times you do that, it tells you that. I just noticed that one time when I was doubling back after I was taking my ball and going home, I crossed it and it said 1 lap left. And I was like, I just crossed it like 3 or 4 times. I was like, okay, that was fun. And because the other cars were right there watching me do it, and I feel like they were all like, look, I got families at home. I got, there's a turkey at home waiting for me because I came in first. I'm like, nah, you're not going anywhere. I still got 1 lap left. Now I have 2. Now I have 1. Now I have 2. And so that was just kind of that's how the mechanics of this game work, is that when you cross that line, it gives you this note every time.
It was a simpler time for programming. I have just a couple quick throwaways. The bonus games, there's bonus games in this that where you have to do like a fast, like AB, like a tug of war and a drag race. And I don't know, it's fine. It's a way to earn extra lives, but they're just like, they don't need to be there. It just feels like frosting on top of an already frosted cake.
It's a hat on a hat.
Yeah. Hat on a hat. Totally. the CPUs drivers can still pick up 1-ups when they're distributed on the race course.
I know, right? That's so insulting.
Yeah, which I decided is insulting's the right word for it. I decided it's insulting because the CPUs cannot phase out, right?
Yeah, no, they can lose an infinite number of times. So
yeah, so that was pretty insulting. And the first time, it's one of those things where like, I can't remember what the source of this is, but somebody's saying like, when I saw Guile throw a sonic boom while backing up, right? That's when I knew the game was cheating. Like, that's what this feels like. It's like, I know other human players have to be able to pick them up, but why are you allowed to pick them up, you freaking android?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's it's like watching somebody who's allergic to tree nuts just taking all of the peanut butter off of the shelf and like throwing it into their cart and then throwing the cart into the river. You're like, I could have eaten that.
The only other thing, just because I said that I would mention this and, I'm a man of my word, is the planes, the biplanes.
Yeah.
Because, this game has weapons, and we didn't talk too much about the weapons because, honestly, like, it's not really that big of a part of it. They make it seem like it's a huge part of it, but it's really more about the driving. There's biplanes in some of the levels that just fly over the course and drop bombs, and the explosion hitbox is fair. The explosion animation is way too long. So if you get anywhere near the little explosion animation, you explode, right? So I didn't love that. And I got good at serpentining a little bit and like avoiding the explosions. And like, I was just like, all right, this is just it's another blue shell thing, right? Where you're just like, okay, I guess this is just a part of this racing game, whatever. It's such a core part of the racing game that it's on the box art. And
yes,
I kind of love that a kid would pick this up, or their parent might pick this up and look at it and go like, huh, so what kind of game is this exactly? Yeah, there's a biplane dropping bombs. There's a truck back there shooting a missile. There's gigantic Excitebike style, like, 90-degree angle ramps in the middle of this race course. Like, what is this? And I just, I appreciate them putting it on the box, because then the first time you're in a level that has that, you can't be like, I didn't know this was going to happen.
Well, and it does. And the fun thing that I found out is it is not always a biplane. Sometimes it's a P-51, so what is happening? Like what weird death? Because this has got to be like, not Logan's Run. What's the one I'm thinking of with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Crap.
Yeah. Running Man.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's based on a Stephen King novel. Oddly enough,
I was gonna say like we can edit out us
now
going back and forth.
Yeah, we got there quick enough. It's Running Man.
Yeah, it's Running Man. Yeah, we definitely aren't coming off of a 5-minute discussion that was edited out. But yeah, no, it's what weird kind of Running Man universe is this, where not only are you racing, because it's a racing game, all right, we're racing, that's cool, but where biplanes are swooping in and dropping bombs on you, and everybody's just kind of like, no, that makes sense.
You know what it is, because it's RC Pro-Am, so these are all like RC cars, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but this is the thing, is it's you and your 3 friends driving your dad's RC cars, but then your dad is he's the only one who's allowed to fly the plane. So you're outside playing with your friends, and then occasionally your dad gets bored and comes over and flies the plane over.
See, what I literally, as you were saying that, I was kind of piecing it together. I got to 90% of the same thing you did, which was all the same. Like you're just sitting there doing RC racing cars with your friends, but you have the one jerk friend who didn't buy an RC car. He bought like a biplane. He's like, "Can I play too, gang?" And it's like, "No, we're playing RC cars." And it's like, but I've got a biplane. It's like, "No." And he goes, "Fine." I mean, like this would be, because that's what Bucknell would have done. Like that's what, he would have just flown his biplane and then run the car off the road. And we would have been like, "What the hell, man? We were doing this." He's like, "Well, maybe next time biplanes are in the race. I know what to tell you."
yeah, maybe we should all go to the RC store at the same time, like I said. But you four went together, and I had to go on the next Saturday, so I bought a plane, and now your little truck explode.
Yeah, so, take that. So, yeah, man, did it hold up?
Weirdly, yes. Right? Like, right? I really, up until we were getting ready to start recording, so probably, we've been at this for a little over an hour and 20 minutes. As recently as 90 minutes ago, I still didn't know what my rating was going to be, but no nostalgia goggles required. It's a weird little game. It's super snackable, which I think is a big part of what makes it hold up, is that you could pick this up, play for 5 minutes, and then be done with it, or you could pick this up, and I would encourage you to play with other people, right? Like, pick it up and play with your friends, and just like a Mario Kart or a Twisted Metal, like, you'll laugh and you'll be, trying to smack the controller out of each other's hands, and like, you'll just have a grand old time, right? Like, this game is very simplistic looking and certainly sounding, but it really has a thoughtful design. It's well balanced. The mechanics are deep enough to be interesting without so complicated that you're like, why am I playing Kid Icarus? Like, it's just an interesting little weird. It came later in history than it should have. Like, I could recommend this. Like, no nostalgia goggles required.
Yeah, and that's I think you kind of hit on the right tone of this game, because I agree with you. No nostalgia goggles required. It's just weirdly fun, because the stakes are just, for a game, again, that kicks you back to the beginning every time. But I mean, even if you get 10, 15 courses in, you've only really probably sunk about 5 to 7 minutes into that, right? So absolutely, this is a game where, you'll be sitting there racing, and I could totally just see, you're just sitting there like giggling over the fact that, a biplane just came through and hit you, or, you spun out on some oil, or, everybody else finished, so you hard stopped at the finish line and are just like, oh, what are you gonna, and then all of a sudden, like, you're wrestling with your friend trying to get their controller to make them cross the finish line, but they're like, no, we're just gonna sit here forever. Like, it's just got that kind of like weird, just generic jackassery feel to it, to where, yeah, it's just kind of fun. And in the same way that you debated on how to open this one, and sometimes, like, because I always try to come up with the closing, like, as we're talking about it, and sometimes I'm just swinging for the fences where I'm racking my brain, but I actually have two good ones, right? Which is when you mentioned memorizing pi, I feel like I'd be remiss to say that pi isn't 3.141592653589793238462643383327950288. And I know the people listening don't know that I'm not necessarily staring at a computer that has it all up there, but you can vouch for the fact that I've done that before.
And you did that fast enough that it would be difficult to read a string of numbers that fast.
Yep. And back in the day, I used to tell people that, my 8th grade teacher gave us a point of extra credit for everything that we memorized beyond 3.14. That was a lie. I did it for me, and I did it for fun.
More vulnerability. This has been a deep episode.
But honestly, if I want to close out the episode, it's RC Pro-Am Too Good.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less